What's up, guys? Pastor Jim here, coming to you from the Atmosphere Studio with another edition of Atmosphere Life Groups. And first, let me tell you again, thank you for taking the next step and joining a life group this season. I am so pumped that you did, because I really believe that we are better together. And I believe just by you making that step and joining a life group, you have already probably experienced your faith being elevated, because you've surrounded yourself not with perfect people, but with people that are desiring to also level up in their faith. And so we are really, truly better together. And the reason I commend you first on this video is because we are kind of wrapping things up this season, and we're going to take a break as we go through Christmas, and then we're going to relaunch life groups in the middle of January, and we want you back in a life group at the beginning of the year. So just mark your calendar that we're going to fire our life groups back up at the middle of January. So talk to your life group host and see if they're going to be hosting. And if they're not, some other new life group hosts are coming on board, and you can jump in their life group, and it's all going to be good in the hood. Well, we want to talk to you tonight about our new series called Anxious for Nothing. And we couldn't have planned this better as far as rolling this new series out, because honestly, we just crossed the toughest anniversary our community has ever faced. The borderline shooting and the Woolsey fire that both happened back to back last year just devastated so many families in the area. But it also left our community with anxiousness. Am I going to be shot? Am I going to be burned out of my home? And this isn't just a local issue. The feeling of anxiety is a national crisis. Matter of fact, sociologists are branding our age the age of anxiety, because so many people are suffering from anxiety disorders. I was kind of looking at something I found very interesting. There was a survey that YouVersion, the Bible app, did last year, and they wanted to find out the most popular Bible verse on their app. And so they looked at the data of people that have shared verses, highlighted verses, made comments about verses. And the number one Bible verse that was shared, highlighted, and commented on was Isaiah 41 verse 10. It says, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." Such a good verse. Maybe even tonight, that verse by itself ministered to you. You needed to hear that. Well, so many people enjoy that verse because it has a way of encouraging you, especially if you are letting fear run your life. If you are drowning in worry right now, if you have all of these what if bubbles that are swimming around in your head, a verse like that really breathes hope into your soul that may be feeling hopeless tonight. Two other popular Bible verses that have been shared and highlighted on the YouVersion Bible app are 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 7 that says, "Turn all of your anxiety over to God." And then, of course, Philippians chapter 4, verse 6 and 7. This is where we get our series title, Anxious for Nothing. It says, "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication, make your requests known to God. And the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus." There's a reason these verses are so popular, because so many people around us are drowning in their own anxieties. I've dealt with it firsthand. My wife has battled with it. Now I've battled with it. And chances are you've battled with it, or at least know somebody in your family that battles with it. And so we want to talk about this thing because the Bible talks a lot about it. And matter of fact, nobody's immune to this. Even godly people that love Jesus with all their heart battle this. And one of the classic examples in the Bible is a story of the man of God, Elijah, who was a prophet of God, very much like Isaiah, and he did miracles just like Moses did. It seemed like he had this like divine pipeline directly to God. God would download things to him all the time. But even a man of God like Elijah struggled with anxiety and depression. And we read about his struggle in 1 Kings chapter 19. And it's interesting to note that in chapter 18, he was kicking the devil's butt. I mean, there were things happening in chapter 18, miracles of fire coming from heaven and rain returning. I mean, Elijah was on a miracle kick. He was so pumped after these miracles happened. It says that he ran down the mountain, outran Ahab, who was the king of Israel, outran his chariot. It's like running from Thousand Oaks to Camarillo and like passing all the cars on the 101 freeway. It was like that. He was so pumped. But then in chapter 19, Jezebel, the queen of Israel, showed her distaste for Elijah and said, I'm going to kill you like you killed the prophets of Baal by the end of the day. And it says that he was afraid and ran to another city, which was another 100 miles away from where he was at. And then he sent his assistant away. And then he started talking to God, saying, God, take my life. It's over. Everything's done. He went from revival to complete defeat. You know, I've noticed in my own ministry over the years that the fiercest attacks often strike after some great accomplishments. And so Elijah's not alone. I think the devil like really leans in after we have this huge accomplishment because he doesn't want us to have the momentum of God moving for us in our lives. But all that to say, Elijah was in a very, very dark space, a space that was paralyzing him, a space that was making him feel like all he wanted to do was die. Can you relate to where Elijah's at? Now, I believe there were 3 factors that contributed to Elijah's demise. And you might want to write these down as a life group: exhaustion, isolation, and distortion. They're not the only factors, but I believe they were the biggest factors in aiding Elijah in falling into this dark pit of anxiety and depression. And I want to talk just briefly tonight about this first factor, the exhaustion factor, because I'm telling you, we are such a busy culture that we are waking up tired. And if there's one factor that I identify with more than the other factors, it's this one: exhaustion. We are so busy and we're running so hard and so fast that we are burning ourselves out. Now, Jesus spoke into this problem that we all tend to kind of build up in our lives. He constantly told us, slow down. He constantly told us, don't worry. He constantly told us, come to me and I will give you rest. Matter of fact, in Matthew 11, Jesus proclaims that when we come to him, we yoke up with him and we learn from him. He says, I will give rest to your soul. There are things in this world that promise rest to your mind and even rest to your body, but only Jesus is going to bring rest to your soul. So I've noticed that when I come to Jesus and I just sit before Jesus, that he's able to breathe rest into my exhaustion like nothing else in my life. There's another story in the Gospel of Luke chapter 10. He talks about these 2 sisters, Martha and Mary, and they're so different from one another. And Martha is busy preparing this meal for all of Jesus's guests and Jesus himself. And so she's getting the fine china out. She's like making sure the tablecloths are ready. And so she's in the kitchen while Mary is sitting at the feet of Jesus. And Martha is getting annoyed that her sister's not helping. So she turns to the guest of honor and says, hey, help me out. Commend her to get in the kitchen and help me. And Jesus looks at Martha and says, Martha, Martha. You never want to hear Jesus, by the way, repeat your name twice. It's never a good thing. Martha, Martha, you are so anxious and busy and troubled doing so many things, but only one thing is necessary. And Mary has chosen the good portion. So many of us, we run around like Marthas. We're troubled and anxious about so many things. And Jesus said, we would benefit so much in our lives if we just learn to slow down and spend more time with God. You always hear people talk about devotions, and we almost kind of treat it like it's a habit that we need to do to be a good Christian, like we check the box. But we don't really look at it as a necessity to help keep anxiety out of our life, to help keep depression from gaining a stronghold in our soul. That spending time with Jesus really does three things. It gives us rest. That's the first thing it does. But then it does something else. It helps us remember. It helps us remember that no matter what trouble we're facing, God is greater than the trouble. And let me tell you something, distance always creates distortion. So when you're not spending time with God, it's easy for these troubles that you are facing to feel like they're bigger than God. But as soon as you start like putting the praise music on, getting your Bible out, start praying, man, God shows up and he reminds you that he is so much bigger than the problems that you're facing. But not only does God give you a chance to rest and remember, but sitting with Jesus actually refuels you. So many of us are exhausted because we're running on empty. Our spiritual tanks are on E. The light is on the dashboard and we feel it. We feel that we're running on fumes. And Jesus wants to refuel us because as we're sitting with Jesus, he's speaking to us. So Jesus has the words of life for you. He is the one that wants to fill you with hope, remind you of the promises, also to tell you of his purposes. He wants to encourage you. He wants to correct you. And there's a reason that Jesus is also called the Wonderful Counselor. He wants to counsel you through the trouble that you're in. And if you sit with him, you're giving him the opportunity to speak into your life. That's why I believe that Paul says, be anxious for nothing, but in everything make your requests known to God. When you're speaking to God, you're giving God a platform to speak back to you. So as you guys talk in your group discussion tonight, I want you to be thinking about Martha and Mary. I want you to be thinking about Elijah. And I want us as a church to push back on anxiety when it starts pushing against our lives. Have a great session, and we'll see you next time.